big deal. You know, that was really an accomplishment because he's trying.
In the previous video, Dr. Tomlinson examined how differentiation can be effectively applied in classrooms. In this video, she looks more closely at curriculum and how differentiation can help clarify what students need to know, what they need to understand, and what they need to be able to do. She will also continue with her presentation of classroom examples to illustrate how to implement differentiation most effectively. And now, Dr. Tomlinson.
Okay, next point is one that you have talked about a little bit in some of your sessions and probably will continue to today as well. A non-negotiable of really high-quality differentiation is high-quality curriculum. And again, we mentioned this yesterday, but if you're teaching curriculum that's foggy in some ways, murky to you about why it matters, murky to the kids about what it's for, what people would do with it, and then you differentiate it, you get multiple versions of fog. And you've spent all that time coming up with different ways to access something that's not crystal clear in the first place. And so the quality of curriculum is a big deal. When we're trying to streamline this here at Curry with our students, we tell kids that if you can accomplish two things as a teacher with your curriculum, you can go home and rest having had a good day. It's not that this is the whole story, but honest to goodness, it is a really big part of it. If you can engage kids with what you're doing, their little pea brains want to stick with you. What you're doing is intriguing, it's surprising, it's puzzling, it's irksome. If you can engage them and keep them away from drooling over text messages or whatever. They've got many alternatives to us, by the way. That's a good thing. Brain needs to want to stay with you. And if you can help them understand what they're learning instead of just commit it to memory, those two things, if you can hit those two things, you've hit a home run, balls out of the ballpark there. Engagement and understanding will lead to learning success, which of course then is a sign of teaching success as well. What does it mean to engage kids? Well, these kinds of things engage kids. You know it from looking at your own classrooms. We know it from research. When something is surprising, novel doesn't mean Twinkie. It just means sort of unexpected, fresh. Oh, that's nice for a change. When something has cultural significance, most of us in this room are white and probably middle class. An increasing number of our students aren't. I never found school culturally irrelevant, but that's not surprising. All the literature reflects my culture. All the history reflects my culture. Most of the holidays that we celebrated reflect my culture. Most of the teachers that stood in front of me reflected my culture. If I were an African American kid, a Native American kid, a Hispanic kid, a kid from Korea, I'd have a lot less chance to know that anybody from my culture impacted mathematics or science. I'd have a lot less chance to see people that look like me in the mirror, acting like mathematicians and scientists. I'd have a lot less opportunity to see my holidays, the ones that everybody's kind of hoo-hawing about. The same school I worked in Chapel Hill that did such a nice job with the rubrics had a high school with a woman who did the coolest thing. Anytime they had celebrations, they had at that time, a split population that was white and African American. They're getting an increasing number of Hispanic students now, and I wonder if she's branched out. But anytime they had a holiday and you'd have a special meal at school, she would have a special line with the traditional holiday stuff, turkey and dressing, and she'd have a special line with imported African American foods. Boy, did I love going to that place on the, some of that stuff was just really fine. And of course, what was interesting was it wasn't that you were African American, you have to eat over here, and if you're white, you eat over here. So everybody was pigging out all over the place. But it just made such a statement that somebody else's food is part of a celebration. And it struck me, I'd just never seen that anywhere. I had a wonderful opportunity several times to work at the United Nations Independent School in New York, where I think they have something like 92 language groups represented. That cafeteria it serves food from probably 10 or 15 different nations every day. Had no idea what most of it was, but it sure was yummy. And the notion that a kid should show up at school and find something, you know, that's really kind of familiar to eat, sort of a nice thing there. So trying to make science relevant to a kid. Who are the scientists from your culture? Who are the people right now that look like you that practice this stuff? What do people do with this in communities like yours and yours and yours? What are applications that all kinds of people make of this mathematics? Who are the movers and shakers using technology from a variety of cultures? If you can help me hook something to my own personal passions, if you can show me how mathematics relates to the music that I love, I will love mathematics better. If you can grab my emotions, I think that's what the teacher I was talking to you about yesterday did with the math jeers. She really tapped deeply into the fears and the doubts and the joys of middle school kids when they were doing those jeers, and it actually made an emotional connection with math from them rather than burying the emotions. Make kids laugh, make them a little angry, puzzle them, help them feel compassion for something that this is moving toward. Give them a product, something they can actually create, do, or make, especially for a real audience that will have a real impact. Choices, not unstructured license, but choices within parameters, and as many as possible. And then anytime you can help a kid see that what they're learning can make a contribution to the broader world, not in 10 years, but now, that's a big deal. If we can do some of these kinds of things, we get engagement. And if we're differentiating curriculum that has a few of these attributes in it, it's going to have more power because the stuff we're differentiating is good. Wiggins and McTighe tell us that if we want understanding, not engagement, but understanding, we need to look at that mass of stuff we're supposed to cover and breathe deeply 3 times and say, okay, this is typically an unorganized batch of stuff that isn't all of equal worth. So what are the big ideas, the essential understandings? When Marcia was talking with you yesterday about this, the KUDs that you're hearing about in some sessions, what are the U's? What are the big understandings of the discipline? What do kids have to know? And what do they have to be able to do in order to wrap around, discover, expand these understandings? And then what else is there on your plate that you're supposed to help the kids learn? Jace McTighe says that this becomes intellectual Velcro. When you have that understanding, when you see how it works, then this stuff has something to hook to, and it stands a better chance of incorporating and making meaning and of hanging on with you. Easy to divide up your curriculum this way? What do you think? I don't think it must be, because most of us don't. I think it's easier just to keep plowing through the mud. But it is like plowing mud. If we could just sort of see, so what do they have to understand? What has to go with that so that they've got the tools and the knowledge they need to do it? And we made meaning first and then moved ahead, I think we'd do much better. Otherwise, we get Peppermint Patty, who says the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Secretary of State, Cape Cod, the Dark Ages, the Gulf of Mexico, Nova Scotia, New York. Ping! That's it, ma'am. My head's full. And there's too much of that stuff, and their heads get full before the stuff can go in, and it starts coming out of both ears. You've heard this, hopefully, at the conference. We'll hopefully hear it again. If you want to differentiate curriculum, an important early step is to say, what should kids know at the end of this unit? What do they absolutely have to know? Facts, names, dates, not 8,000 of them, but which ones are critical? What do they have to be able to do? Reading skills, social skills, research skills, skills of the discipline in math or in science or in technology. And this is the killer one. What do they have to be able to understand? And the scary part, of course, is that we have to have the courage to say, this is pretty embarrassing, but I've taught this for 11 years and I have no clue what the understandings are. And once you can get that out of your mouth, then you're freed up to go hunting for them. And when you find them, it's just the coolest thing. I mean, you just really feel like you've been reborn in some way. I want to share with you 3 examples related to curriculum. And the first one is not science, math, or technology. The next ones are. It's a poetry contract that a teacher did as an early step for her students in differentiation. She did not want to do it. She was coerced to do it. She really wanted it to fail because she didn't want to have to live with the notion that differentiation could make anything better. And she and a teacher, a cooperating teacher that she was a resource specialist that she was kind of forced to work with, put this together. In the morning, the teacher taught poetry in a pretty poor way, and I can say that because I've taught it that way too. She'd teach the kids a haiku, and then they'd write a haiku, and then she'd teach them a limerick, and they'd write a limerick, and then she'd teach them an alphabet poem, and they'd write an alphabet poem. And that was the whole unit. They'd do that for about 3 weeks, and then they'd go home and they'd study poetry. It's not a very good way to teach, of course, because poets don't get up on Monday and say, it's Monday, I guess I'll write a haiku today, because that's what I do every Monday. But this resource teacher said to her, because you can't upset somebody's apple cart too much too fast, she said, I tell you what, you go ahead and teach the unit in the morning like you'd like to, and I'm going to do a contract in the afternoon, and I'll come in and I'll help you with the contract with the kids. They'll have some choices about some of the things that they write and how to put it together to make it better for them. So each kid got a contract, and every one of them had the same thing at the top. They had these things they had to do, plus 3 other things they could do. So for example, they did study haiku in the class, but haiku's not up here, and if a kid wanted to do a haiku, they could put that there. On the other hand, one of the things that they have was to use some sort of image from the computer, and this was a while ago. We've got lots better images now. But to use a computer image as a simile, metaphor, or analogy for the essence of the poem. If the kid would like to do that again, they can reproduce the same thing. This is one version of the contract, and this is the next version. And honestly, if you blinked, you wouldn't even notice that there are any differences, except that one has circles on the top and one has squares. Everybody has the same headings. Everybody has 3 choices. I asked the teacher, this one, by the way, is a more advanced version than this one. And I'll give you a couple of illustrations. A cinquain is a pattern poem. And on the simpler contract, the kids had to write a cinquain. On the more advanced one, they have to write a diamante, which is also a pattern poem. It's just a more sophisticated pattern. In the more basic one, they have to interpret a poem, which is a metaphorical poem, and the metaphor is fairly clear. It's a good, crisp, clear metaphor. They also have to interpret a poem on the more advanced one, but what they're interpreting could be taken different ways, and therefore involves a little more open-endedness. I asked the teacher why she had done circles on one and squares on the other. I love things that happen in the real world. Her comment was, because she was the resource teacher, I don't know all of these kids well, and so I don't know which ones are more advanced when I look at them and which ones might be struggling. And she said, I've just gotten bifocals, and to be able to see what they're doing, I'd have had to bend down and put my nose practically on the piece of paper. And she said, if I've got this, then I can tell, oh, that's the more advanced contract because it has a square on it instead of the circle. The purpose of the circle and the square was that somebody had to sign and date it when you got the task finished, and so it served that purpose, but it was a signal for her. The kids actually love this. And ironically, the teacher got thank you notes from parents. It's the best unit of the year. The kids have never liked poetry before. They really like the poetry unit this time. So as lame as this is, it really was an improvement. And most of us have made lame improvements, but they were improvements. And if you just keep going, you know, that's okay. Here's what I want to show you about this. If this teacher were to say to me, do you think we got any better this year? I'd say absolutely. You let the kids have some freedom. You distinguish between kids who need a more fundamental task and kids who can reach out a little bit more. You learn to manage the classroom a little more flexibly. You learn to trust the kids a little bit more. You learn to know them a little bit better. You did a lot of good things. But next year when we do this unit, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to do something that has nothing to do with the differentiation piece, just with curriculum. And I'm going to say to the kids, guys, when you write your poems, I'd like you to do what a poet does. And what that means is I'd like you to think about a topic that you care about. And I want you to write your poems to help you explore that topic that you care about. So write about friendship, write about sports, write about dogs, write about beauty. Pick something that you care about and use the poetry to explore it. I'd like for you to know the names of the kinds of poems that we worked with and the characteristics of each of them. I'd like you to understand that poets explore things that matter to them, and poetry helps us and the poet understand ourselves and the world. And every day when we finish our writing, we're going to talk about how different ones of you did your explorations. And I'm going to get you to reflect in your journals about how thinking about your stuff has helped you understand that stuff and yourself better. And what I'd like you to be able to do is write with expression and use effective mechanics, and therefore I want you to use this classroom checklist that we've been using. None of this was explicit in this thing. It was just write the poems and check them off. Not even any sense that it mattered to do them correctly. And certainly not any sense that they carried any meaning. So next year, I want to grow up one more step. I'm going to keep the contract. I'm going to tighten the curriculum. Is the unit going to be any better if I do it this way? Can you see that? The next year, I'm going to grow it up again, still not by messing with the differentiation, but I'm going to say to the kids, you know, guys, all year in literature, we've been talking about these concepts: evolution, exploration, expression, and perspective. I still want you to know these things and to do these things, but I want you to understand that as we explore ideas, the ideas evolve, and so do we. Exploration leads to understanding. Exploration of varied perspectives broadens our understanding, and expression reveals the writer. So as you're doing your contract, we're going to have discussions around these things to reflect these ideas. And here's the deal. This time, I want you to choose one thing to write about, dogs, and I want you to do all of your writings from a different perspective. Do one from the perspective of a dog lover. Do one from the perspective of somebody who lives behind a dog that barks all the time. Do one from the perspective of the dog. Do one from the perspective of your mom, whom you promised you would walk the dog when she bought it, and you did that for 2 weeks. Do one from the perspective of the flea that lives on the dog. And always what we're going to do is come back and talk about how looking at things from different perspectives and exploring that way changes your brain. Better unit than the first year? Better unit than the second year? And I didn't change the differentiation. I changed the quality of the curriculum.
In the next video, we will continue looking at differentiation from different perspectives as Dr. Tomlinson presents examples of responsive teaching techniques used in science classrooms.